Number 10. Flash vs. Arrow. During Season 3 of Arrow and Season 1 of The Flash, we got our first official Arrowverse crossover. Flash vs. Arrow. This was such a crazy thing to witness, as it really was the first time we saw a crossover between the two shows. So you might be asking yourself, why would they be fighting each other, especially in a crossover? Well, it's all thanks to a metahuman named Rainbow Raider, who has the power to send anyone into an uncontrollable rage. So he sent the Flash into this rage, and guess what? Him and the Arrow fought, and it was epic. Overall, it was considered a tie, but some fans argue that Oliver was the true winner since he subdued Barry in this rage. But I guess we'll never really know. Number 9. Supergirl vs. Reign. In Supergirl Season 3 mid-season finale, she finally came face to face with her main big bad of the season, Reign, who was a genetically altered Kryptonian known as a world killer. The two had one of the most epic fights in the Arrowverse, and Kara lost, which was a really massive shock. Kara usually always ended up winning her fights, so this came as a massive surprise to fans, but it made the whole dynamic with Reign that much more interesting. It was also very unique in terms of music, as it was around Christmas time, and during the battle they fly through a company having a Christmas party, and Kara and Reign duke it out to Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree. Number 8. The Legends turn into a giant BEEBO. In the Season 3 finale of Legends of Tomorrow, we got this epic showdown between BEEBO and Malice. Now, this showdown happened only because of the totems of Zambezi, which allowed the Legends to all transform together into an avatar. They need to think of something pure, which, when Nate, aka Steel, thought of something pure, it was none other than the toy BEEBO. After transforming into BEEBO, they are able to fight against the demon Malice and defeat him by body slamming him into the ground. I can honestly say that I don't think anyone expected this moment going into this Season 3 finale of Legends of Tomorrow.
And at 7, Reign. Samantha Sam Arias is a former Kryptonian world killer known as Reign, who was sent to Earth prior to Krypton's destruction. She was found by Patricia Arias, who raised her as her daughter, and as an adult, Samantha briefly became the acting CEO of L Corp before transitioning to position as the CFO, though she still partially held the former position on the behalf of her employer Lena Luthor. Samantha is a single mother of Ruby and a good friend of Lena, Alex Danvers, and Kara Danvers. Samantha remained unaware of her origins until her powers started to manifest, leading to the emergence of one of the strongest adversaries Supergirl has ever had to face. After Purity and Pestilence awoke, Reign noted that her human self Samantha was much stronger than she thought as they fought for control. She is the leader of the World Killers, a race of Kryptonians designed by the children of Juru through advanced genetic engineering and powerful dark magic after centuries of research. She has all the powers of a Kryptonian and then some, probably being the fiercest villain the show has ever seen. Aside from ratings. I'm just saying that because it's ended, not because I don't like it. It only ended because like Melissa got pregnant and she wouldn't really be able to film Supergirl while pregnant. And I'm pretty sure that's why it ended. I don't think that the ratings were bad, but I had to make the joke.
Number 6. Barry creates Flashpoint. In the Season 2 finale of The Flash, we got the creation of Flashpoint. Yes, Barry decides to travel back in time to prevent his mother from being killed by the Reverse Flash and prevent his father from being portrayed as the person who killed her. So in this reality, his mother is alive and his father is not in prison for the death of Barry's mother. He doesn't even have to be the Flash in this reality. Things seem great for Barry, but after Barry starts losing memories of his former life and after witnessing the consequences of him going back in time and it about to cement itself as the original reality, Barry decides to go back to the original reality. But once he comes back, some things in that original reality have already changed as a consequence of him trying to change the timeline.
At number 5 is the issue that the Arrowverse wasn't built up properly by the DCEU before it started. What DC was missing in terms of their television rollout was an established world that would inform a set of new series for the small screen. If some of the earlier and more ambitious DCEU projects had worked a little better, there would have been more to work with when booting up a Supergirl or a Green Arrow series. And the studios were probably quite aware of this because they made the major decision to have their TV shows all exist as standalone storylines, without acting as continuations or prologues of the DCEU films. Part of what makes people interested in watching Marvel's The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is that they'll be able to see what happens for those two characters and the world around them after after Endgame. But with much fewer people caring about what happened after, let's say, the Justice League, The Flash had to do a lot of that work on its own, which is a lot to ask for and might have put too much pressure on the franchise to really allow it to flourish.
Number 4. The Wedding Brawl. In the Arrowverse crossover, Crisis on Earth X, we are celebrating the wedding of Barry and Iris, finally getting the chance to begin their new life together as a married couple. But things get interrupted right before they say their I do's by some Nazis from a different Earth. But not just any Nazis, doppelganger Nazis of themselves, like Oliver, Kara, and Tommy. It was actually cool to see him return and be Earth X Prometheus, since many fans thought that he could have been the Prometheus in Season 5, before it was revealed to be Adrian Chase. So yeah, they have to fight off a group of doppelganger Nazis during their wedding, which was quite the team up we all wanted to witness.
Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Damien Darhk. Damien Darhk is certainly a powerful villain, and one of the only superpowered villains that the Green Arrow has gone up against in the Arrowverse, at least on his own show, the exception being Deathstroke. However, Damien is also one of the only villains to actually accomplish his goal, even if it was partially. And after the destruction of Haven Rock, his power was basically insurmountable, vaporizing bullets and arrows instantly when they got close to him. And he said himself that he didn't even mean to do that. And while he was killed by Oliver in the Season 4 finale using the power of positive thinking, literally in this case, not like the Flash's, he still managed to come back as a part of the Legion of Doom in Legends Season 2, and later on be resurrected by his daughter in later seasons of that show. He sacrificed himself though so his daughter wouldn't become possessed by malice and turn into a monster like him. But still, after Haven Rock's destruction, he is one of the most powerful beings in the Arrowverse, period. If only we got to see more of that power.
Number 1. Crisis on Infinite Earths. During the Arrowverse crossover of all crossovers, a lot of significant things happened. I'm making it its own category since I could have done a full list of its own for all of the content we got during this crossover. I wanted to highlight a lot of the other twists during the Arrowverse that I had not yet done before. So with that said, let's get into it. One of the craziest things Crisis managed to pull off was its cameos, and it had tons of them. We got Kevin Conroy as Batman, Brandon Routh and Tom Welling as Superman, Erica Durance back as Lois Lane, Ashley Scott as Huntress, Tom Ellis as Lucifer, Ezra Miller as the Flash, Burt Ward as Robin, Robert Wool back as Alexander Knox from Tim Burton's Batman, Chris Williams as Black Lightning, and the list goes on and on and on. I mean, we saw characters from the show Titans, Swamp Thing, Stargirl, and the film Green Lantern. Heck, even the writer of the original comic, Marv Wolfman, made a cameo. Aside from those, we had other massive moments. Oliver became the Spectre, Earth 90's Flash sacrificed himself, the multiverse was destroyed, the multiverse was reborn at the Battle of the Dawn of Time. It was all so freaking amazing, and as you can see, all of those would have taken up every spot on this list, so that is why we squeezed it into one category so we could talk about other things as well.
And at 10, Multiverse. While Arrow did start out as a single show, the popularity ended up creating The Flash, which was introduced in Arrow Season 2 Episode 8 and concluded in Episode 9, where Barry learns Oliver's identity and then saves his life. That spin-off then started with Flying Colors and then led to the creation of Legends of Tomorrow, Supergirl, Batwoman, Superman and Lois, Stargirl, and more. And I mean, come on, with superhero shows like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and others not making the meme seem proper for these kinds of things, the Arrowverse came in and changed superhero TV for the better. Without the Arrowverse, Marvel may have not had enough confidence to actually try again with WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki, especially after Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which tried to explain why the Avengers were getting Loki's scepter in Age of Ultron, but ultimately didn't. So yeah, a multiverse giving hundreds of people jobs that revitalized the superhero TV show genre, yeah, that's a cinema win in my book. Speaking of a multiverse, did you know that we have a multiverse of channels? The newest of which that you should come check out is Minecraft Nightmare, okay? If you like Minecraft, you'll love our channel. So come say hi, say you're from Top 10 Nerd. Plus, I mean, it's more of me. How could you say no? You all love me here. There's been no hate comments at all. Never.
At number 9 is that the shows are too long. My first criticism is that if the Arrowverse had formatted their shows as limited series, they could have explored more different angles of the DC universe, and the effect that would have on the world building would be immense for a couple of reasons. Firstly, new viewers wouldn't feel overwhelmed to jump on board with the vast lore of the Arrowverse. They could try out a 6-episode series and see if they're interested, and be able to experience a full arc, which would give more people access to the universe. I mean, Arrow's final final season was only 10 episodes and it was probably the best paced season yet. And secondly, if the shows were shorter, the budgets would be higher per episode and we wouldn't have to bear some of the corny effects and costume designs. Just look at how Marvel is succeeding with their Moon Knight limited series. We get to know a character that many new viewers have never heard about within just 6 episodes. And if it's not for us, you can check out The Winter Soldier or Mrs. Marvel and get a sample of their worlds. But with The Flash having 171 episodes and Supergirl having 126, much fewer people are going to be interested in starting from the beginning as new viewers, regardless of whether or not there's some good backstory in there. Less is more, people.
In an 8, the finales. And no, not just because they're ending. The finales that these shows have created some of the most jaw-dropping moments in the DC entertainment multiverse history. The Glades getting destroyed in Star City, Eddie Thawne killing himself to stop Reverse Flash, Barry creating Flashpoint, Lian Yu exploding with everyone on the island, Vandal Savage killing Carter and escaping with Kendra, Kara certain she was going to die in the Supergirl Season 1 finale. All of these moments were incredible and emotional, including even some of the series finales. Oliver meeting Felicity in the afterlife after 20 years actually made me tear up. Even mid-season finales were memorable. Barry's first encounter with Reverse Flash at Christmas, Felicity being shot and nearly dead in Season 4 of Arrow, learning that Iris was going to die. That one made me have to see my girlfriend at the time instantly. Oliver's supposed death in Season 3. I mean, I was watching that in drama class in high school and my jaw dropped as we were walking to the library, okay? They know how to do cliffhangers well, and they used it excellently. I mean, they could have done a couple of them better, but
Number 7. Arrow's Season 5 finale. Arrow's Season 5 finale was one of the best finales, not only in Arrow's history, but in the Arrowverse itself. It was really the culmination to 5 amazing seasons that Arrow had been building up to, the end of the flashbacks on Lian Yu. This season brought the villain, Prometheus, who was one of the best villains the series have ever seen, and it's had some great ones. The finale was set on Lian Yu in both flashbacks and present day. Oliver has to team up with Slade Wilson, yes, Deathstroke, Malcolm Merlin, Captain Boomerang, and Nyssa to help free his friends from Prometheus. In the end of the episode, they end up concluding the flashbacks on Lian Yu by having Oliver finally reaching the shore to signal the boat and even put on a wig and beard to act like he had fully been stranded there for the entire time. In the present day, they are able to defeat Prometheus, but not before he kills himself, which triggers explosives on the island that ultimately destroy it with Oliver's friends still on.
And it's 6 adaptations. While some decisions are questionable, particularly giving birth to your own mother, there are plenty of comic adaptations that have worked well in the Arrowverse. Deathstroke, Green Arrow, and the Flash's suits all work incredibly well, especially when Barry finally gets the golden boots, which when announced at DC Fandom had everyone cheering. At least I think they were cheering. It was online so I couldn't hear them, but it was trending on Twitter, I think. Not to mention the various storyline adaptations like the Trial of Oliver Queen and the Trial of Barry Allen, which were also adapted into the stories of the show. And I mean, some like to argue that if it's not what the comic is, it shouldn't be made, but I think the beauty of this is that there are things that are different in the story. Like, if you want the exact story from the comic, just read the comic. If you know exactly what's going to happen in the story, what's the point of watching it? And that's what the Arrowverse does well, taking what we already know and remember and making it new and exciting all over again. Halfway through into number 5, Tobias Whale. Tobias Whale is the antagonist of all 4 seasons of Black Lightning, and was the most notorious crime boss in Freeland, as well as the arch nemesis of Black Lightning. Powered by a serum that grants him enhanced strength and longevity, which has given him decades of experience, Tobias is one of the most dangerous criminals alive. Fueled by anger due to the abuse he received for being an albino in an African American community, by his father in particular, he worked his way to the top of his city's criminal underworld as the leader of the Gang 100, as well as a high-ranking position in the city council. However, Alvin Pierce exposed him for being a corrupt politician, for which Tobias killed Alvin in front of his son Jefferson Pierce, who would later grow up to be Black Lightning. After the multiverse was rebooted by the Spectre, aka Oliver Queen, Tobias would later become mayor of Freeland, using his knowledge of the Pierce's family identity to continue his war against Black Lightning. Through the usage of an anti-aging serum, Tobias's DNA and cells are augmented, pushing his physical parameters well beyond normal humans, basically slowing his aging to remain in his prime despite being in his late 70s. Oh, and you know, the superhuman strength. He also for an hour of his life was able to turn invisible. So, there's that too. In at 4, Easter eggs. Some of the various Easter eggs from the other shows are actually incredible, and they were doing it since the start, really. Deathstroke's mask on Lian Yu in episode 1 of Arrow made everyone instantly know what was the kind of theme we were going with here. I mean, in Roy's first appearance, he was also wearing a red hoodie, and then all the way to recreating posters for The Flash of Two Worlds and Supergirl versus The Flash. Plus, I mean, we got some pretty sweet name drops of various characters like Red Death and Bruce Wayne before Batgirl was even considered to be a show. These series are packed full of Easter eggs for fans of both multiple shows and the comics alike. Cisco used to wear Big Bang Theory t-shirts all the time, and then Sheldon from Big Bang Theory started wearing and talking about The Flash even more, which is a whole other thing because technically Big Bang Theory would be in the DC multiverse, but that I'm not going to talk about that. There's also the Reverse Flash suit from the past Flash season finale that was designed to look like that of Daniel West, and more so than the rival from season 3, because we can just forget about that. This is the version of Daniel West that I wanted.
Number 3. Moira Queen's death. In season thus, Slade did kill Moira and left Oliver wanting revenge. Number 2. Oliver versus Ra's al Ghul. During the mid-season finale of Arrow Season 3, something crazy happened. Oliver fought Ra's on the top of a mountain, and he lost. The two engaged in a sword fight, which ended with Oliver being stabbed and kicked off a cliff and seemingly killed. They ended the episode with that, and fans had to wait over a month to see what happened next. It was crazy, but in the best possible way, and continued to show why Arrow wasn't playing by normal superhero rules. Everyone going in assumed that Oliver would probably lose at first, but by the end of the fight end up gaining the upper hand and taking down Ra's. But nope, he just straight up lost, and the whole fandom couldn't stop talking about it.
Penultimately, in at number 2, crossovers. There is something to be admired with the crossovers that the Arrowverse has managed to pull together. You have to admit that the majority of these moments were pretty sick. Arrow vs. Flash, Invasion, Crisis on Earth X, Elseworlds, and Crisis on Infinite Earths were all events that they hyped up and typically delivered, especially with both Crisis events, those being Earth X and Infinite Earths. Those crossovers had some major revelations on multiple shows, with Infinite Earths really being the Infinity War of the Arrowverse. Spanning 5 episodes and 5 shows, this was one of, if not the biggest crossover in television, and it changed the entire universe as we know it. It also introduced Ezra Miller's Flash, confirming this to be in the DC Entertainment multiverse now. I also liked seeing Elseworlds because Oliver was the Flash, and it was funny to me. Although I wish he had gotten the opportunity to meet Nora, since at the time she was still on the show, and then Oliver just randomly out of nowhere seeing that Barry had a kid from the future living with him that was also his daughter from the future would have been very interesting to watch. Plus, it brought back John Wesley's ship, Barry Allen, which was pretty damn cool.
Okay, the number one worst thing about the Arrowverse is that the show concepts are just too broad. And before I proceed, I make my half of this list entirely out of love for DC. I just want them to do better. And one of the biggest issues I have with the Arrowverse is that they aren't creative enough with how they frame their shows. What I mean by this is that their shows tend to explore one hero very generally and for episodes and episodes on end, but with no unique angle. Marvel did an amazing job at starting their TV rollout with WandaVision because instead of making a show called The Scarlet Witch and making 200 episodes about various adventures of hers, they decided to take a very specific and creative angle on her growing romance with Vision, and further including subtextual commentary on the medium of television itself while they told this love story. Now, I'm not saying that The Flash, Arrow, Supergirl, or Batwoman are all bad shows, but I am saying that they could have released a whole mini-series on Flashpoint, for example, instead of having it referenced in only one episode in The Flash's 171 episode run. And that's only so far. Anyway, it's pretty clear to me that there were more streamlined, creative ways of telling these characters' stories than covering their entire journeys under one umbrella. But that's just me.
In at 10, Prometheus. Prometheus, aka Simon Morrison or Adrian Chase, is the main villain of Season 5 of Arrow, and a villain of Oliver's own creation, even more so than Deathstroke. You see, Adrian Chase's real name is Simon Morrison, and he's the son of Justin Claiborne. Justin was on Oliver's list in Season 1 and was killed off screen, and is later shown in the flashbacks for this season. Simon posed as Chase in order to get close to Oliver after Prometheus learned that Oliver Queen was the Green Arrow after Tobias Church spilled the beans in earlier episodes. As soon as he was introduced, I knew that he would be the villain. Like, as soon as Adrian Chase was introduced, I knew he would be the villain, but only because whenever they introduce someone new, it's because that they're going to be evil. It was just like a case of logic at that point. But Prometheus had some of the most impactful moments on that show. really being the antithesis to Oliver, getting him to admit that his heroic crusade was just an excuse to kill people, which I personally don't like, but at the same time, he was mentally and physically torturing him for days at that point, so that would explain why Oliver thought that it was true. He also was the only villain to really break Oliver, and he caused William to find out who his father is, and then he killed William's mother in the explosion of Lian Yu, which honestly should have killed more people than just Samantha, but whatever, plot. He also killed his own wife when she found out that he was the throwing star killer. So yeah, ruthless. And at 9, the Dominators. The Dominators were the alien race that served as antagonists in the first major Arrowverse crossover event, Invasion, who came to Earth in order to kill Barry Allen and any other metahumans after Barry altered the timeline to create Flashpoint and then couldn't put it back to exactly the way it was. This served as enough evidence to them that metahumans were dangerous, so they created a metahuman bomb that would wipe out every single one of them around the globe. They were defeated and Firestorm managed to transmute the bomb into water, but damn, this was some incredible work. The Dominators even fell into the classic alien trope of abducting humans, in this case most of the Arrow cast, Diggle, Oliver, Thea, Sarah Lance, and Ray Palmer to scan their minds for intel on the Flash and other metas while putting them in a sort of dream state to keep their minds occupied, resulting in probably one of my favorite episodes of the series ever. A Dominator even made an appearance in the next crossover, Crisis on Earth X, when they were introducing Supergirl while everyone was RSVPing to Barry and Iris' wedding. My question is, if these are the Dominators, where are the submissives? I had to do it. And at 8, SAVITAR. SAVITAR was probably the most easily predicted antagonist identity reveal in The Flash ever, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't a powerful and fun villain. They say that you are your worst enemy. However, in Season 3 of The Flash, this truly turned out to be the case. A time remnant created by Barry Allen to fight SAVITAR, SAVITAR created itself in its own form of weird paradox, where after killing Iris West, Barry is driven so far into the dark that his time remnant is so depressed that it becomes SAVITAR and kills Iris in order to ensure his own existence. It's weird, but it's interesting. And given the future Flash comic storyline where Barry comes back in time to kill himself, this was surely going to happen at some point. But where this character really shines is his power. He is the fastest speedster we've ever seen on the show, even with recent seasons, being so fast he seemingly teleports. But it's later revealed that he just time travels every time he runs, like he goes through the Speed Force and then travels back to like a second after he left, so it appears instant, but he is still fast enough thanks to the SAVITAR suit that he wears that he can get up to that time travel speed nearly instantaneously. He also, being a future form of Barry, has all of Barry's memories, and thus knows every plan Team Flash will come up with or ends up coming up with in order to stop him that Barry knows about. And if Barry didn't end up figuring out who SAVITAR was, they would have kept failing since they wouldn't know to keep Barry out of the loop. It's freaking nuts!
At number 7 is that there is some pretty weak writing at times. One example of this is the overuse of the power of love in The Flash Season 7. When Spectre corrupts the Speed Force, Barry needs to create another one artificially, and the way that he does this is by eventually using the power of love between himself and Iris, and it works. Somehow. But it is reliant on the existence of 3 other forces which are personified as the villains of that season, at least for the first half. And what makes this even weirder is that the personification of the Speed Force is Barry's mother. And although this might add more drama to the season, it's a bit too bizarre to justify since, in essence, Barry gives birth to his own mother. This type of writing just feels like it would never fly in a DC comic, so when you see it in the Arrowverse, it sort of sticks out like a sore thumb, diminishing the credibility of the world they're creating.
And at 6, Ricardo Diaz. Ricardo Diaz was the secret antagonist of the first half of the Season 6 of Arrow, and the main antagonist in the latter half of Season 6, and the first 7 episodes of Season 7. Ricardo, despite not having any real powers until like the very end of his arc, was an incredible adversary to Oliver, resulting in Oliver ultimately going to prison due to him exposing his identity as Green Arrow to the world as a part of a deal with the FBI to actually catch Ricardo. Ricardo Diaz is also the only villain in an Arrow season to not be defeated or killed in the final episode. Malcolm Merlyn wasn't killed, but he did cease being a big bad after Season 1, only serving as a minor antagonist and at some points an ally, so I don't really count count him in this case. DIAZ was also able to control basically all of Star City under Green Arrow's nose, who at the time was John Diggle. However, this corruption would stop at the end of season 6, but DIAZ was still powerful enough to get into Slapside and nearly kill Oliver on his last day in prison, before threatening Felicity, since, as we all know thanks to CinemaSins, that the power of both is stronger than anything else.
Number 5. Martin Stein's death. In the Arrowverse crossover Crisis on Earth X, there was a really big shocking moment. Martin Stein, aka part of Firestorm, dies. Now, this was pretty significant since all of the previous crossovers never had a really big emotional death like this. Like, I am still not over this, guys. But yes, Martin sacrifices himself by manually starting the portal to go back to Earth 1, but he gets shot doing so. He is successful opening the portal, but he's slowly dying as a result of this heroic sacrifice. Things get complicated when Jackson, aka Firestorm's other half, is slowly dying since they are technically connected as a result of them both being half of Firestorm. In the end, Martin tells Jackson to take the antidote that would split them apart, so that Martin can die and Jackson can live. Jackson does finally agree, and thus Firestorm is no more.
In at 4, Malice. Malice was a primordial time demon that was, according to John Constantine, a demon of the highest order, who was imprisoned in another dimension by 5 of the 6 tribes of Zambesi in ancient times. Unable to directly threaten the populations of other dimensions, he worked through his followers as avatars and interdimensionaries, before being released due to the actions of both the Legends and the Order of the Shrouded Compass, the latter of which was led by Nora Dark and her father, Damien Dark. However, he was ultimately killed once and for all by the Legends, who were using the totems of Zambesi to manifest a weapon that could destroy him, which ended up taking the form of a giant BEEBO doll. Oh man. According to Rip Hunter, Malice was perceived as a myth existing throughout all of time, and known by many different names in all types of languages. Rip also states that the Time Masters were too frightened to even speak his name. Agent Ava Sharp mentioned that Malice became a threat after the Legends broke time in the season 2 finale after destroying the Spear of Destiny and getting Reverse Flash killed by Black Flash, something that would later apparently become irrelevant, because he shows up again in Flash, so.
At number 3 is the tendency for the Arrowverse to have not the best costumes. One of the biggest challenges for superhero TV shows or any fantasy genre series on the small screen is to serve the story and its characters properly while working with a smaller budget. And one of the most costly departments in the world of TV and film is the costume department. It seems as though the Arrowverse suffers on this front, considering the fact that we will sometimes come across some very underwhelming costumes, like Elongated Man's costume for instance. It looks like something out of Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Now these details might not always be worth ranking high on a list like this, but when you're bringing pre-existing superheroes from the comics to life on screen, there are standards, and sometimes the Arrowverse isn't able to deliver on those fronts.
Penultimately, in at number 2, Reverse Flash. The Reverse Flash has had quite an impact on the Arrowverse as well, speeding up the timeline by 7 years, since the particle accelerator meant to give Barry his speed was actually meant to explode in 2020. I know in a previous list I said it was 6 years. Barry got struck in 2013, but his show started in 2014, that's why I got confused. However, Thawne posing as Harrison Wells made it in 2013, which gave Barry speed 7 years before he should have, which in turn created a whole new timeline. Something Reverse Flash I guess didn't understand when he told Oliver Queen that he was going to live to be 87 years old, in one of the later episodes of Flash Season 1. However, even after being supposedly wiped from the timeline after Eddie Thawne kills himself in the Season 1 finale, Reverse Flash has come back in almost every single season to my knowledge. I'm pretty sure it's actually every season. I don't think he showed up in Season 3 actually. And in the current Armageddon crossover, spoiler alert by the way since this is still ongoing, 3, 2, 1, made his own reverse flashpoint that turned him into the 100% pure Flash, and Barry into the Reverse Flash. Thawne even got to marry Iris in this new timeline, although it was like 13 years after Barry did, so Thawne clearly isn't really good at closing the deal. Finally, in at number 1, the Anti-Monitor. The Anti-Monitor was the main antagonist of the most recent and presumably final multi-show crossover event, Crisis on Infinite Earths. The Anti-Monitor is definitely the most powerful Arrowverse villain overall, because, well, he managed to not only destroy the universe, but the entire multiverse, causing the Paragons and the Spectre to have to time travel to the dawn of time to be able to fight him, since he had replaced the multiverse with the Antimatter universe, which I personally believe is where the DCEU version of these events take place, but but that's a story for another day. He's really the only big bad of a crossover to accomplish his goal, and caused the death of Oliver Queen, since he had to die to create the new multiverse, which didn't really serve anyone that well, considering how Supergirl and Black Lightning, the two shows brought to Earth Prime by the Crisis, ended up ending the season after Crisis. And those seasons had no big crossover event. So like, I mean, like, it was partially because of COVID, but also just because of the sheer ripple effect that Crisis had on all the shows. The Anti-Monitor, though, went toe-to-toe with the Monitor in that crossover, who was shown already to be extremely powerful, basically a god. So, safe to say that this is the most powerful villain the Arrowverse has ever faced, and probably will ever face.